A lot of what we do in adult life is based upon what we experience as a kid.
For many kids growing up, it might have been wanting to be a train driver or a bus driver, play with big boats. For this next guy, it was dreams of becoming a pilot.
I get paid to do my hobby, and my hobby is flying these old airplanes.
And a very special pilot at that.
Not many people get to fly a Spitfire. This guy does. You never know what's beneath that unassuming demeanour.
Obviously the gun sight we've got here, the only sad thing is we don't use it today. I'd love to use it now.
These are definitely big boys' toys.
Of course, watching vintage aircraft in flight is a real thrill for aircraft fans, full stop. But watching one of the most iconic and instantly recognizable aircraft of all time can raise the hairs on the back of one's neck. And that's just when watching the Spitfire in flight. To be there in the cockpit flying this revered piece of aviation history is overwhelming. These days, not many of us get to see a Spitfire in action. Fewer still get close enough to touch and look around. And the numbers go down to a handful when counting those who actually fly these beautiful aircraft around the skies. As the saying goes, there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. If you're looking for a swaggering, loudmouth, barnstorming style aviator, you won't find one flying a Spitfire. This job requires a cool character, more full of competence than bravado. Sarah Hannah tells us what it takes to fly a Spitfire these days.
Patience, skill, nerves of steel, and an incredible sense of humour, because if you don't have the latter, the rest of it isn't going to work, quite frankly.
Lee is chief pilot for the Old Flying Machine Company at Duxford, England. His job is to fly MH434, one of the most recognised Spitfires still flying today.
I love vintage, old machinery, whether cars, motorbikes, anything where you have to be slightly mechanically minded to be involved. And any opportunity I had with my father to go flying, I took it.
Lee's great. He's been with us a long time. He's extremely professional and very direct with everything he says and does, and you're not left with any not knowing what's going on. He's extremely highly respected in what he does and one of the best.
Lee is, of course, part of a team, the man in the hot seat who readily acknowledges the team effort of all concerned.
And I was very lucky because I actually started learning on vintage aeroplanes themselves. I learnt on a Stomp and also a Harvard. So I was so lucky. It was a unique opportunity to actually learn from the start on vintage aeroplanes, so obviously learning the techniques and handling of old aeroplanes and the thinking that goes behind that, and also all the flying characteristics that go along with these old historic aeroplanes. So I was very, very lucky from an early age.
Originally designed in the early 1930s by R.J. Mitchell, the Supermarine Spitfire first earned its reputation in the Battle of Britain, flying alongside its more numerous but less nimble stablemate, the Hawker Hurricane. The power of the Merlin engine and the elliptical shape of its wing were what gave the Spitfire the edge over its adversaries. The Spitfire was upgraded, up-engined and up-gunned over the course of the war, going through many variations and marks. The Old Flying Machine Company keep the Mark 9 MH434 in tip-top condition. and like all vintage aircraft operators, have to adhere to many aviation checks and regulations.
So if they're coming up to the hours where the propeller is going to be needing a major overhaul, or an engine, as we've just done with the Spitfire, you schedule that so you have enough hands on deck, enough workforce in the hangar to get that job done.
There are many challenges in keeping a 60-year-old warbird in good flying condition.
Edge of V12 liquid-cooled engines.
Not just rules and regulations, but also the management of the machine.
And yes, I'd say the management of it is you have to know and you have to use the right technique, because if you use the wrong one, you stand a very good chance of actually overboosting the engine. And by that I mean if you had too low of an RPM and too high of a boost, you would overboost the engine and you'd end up with detonation and damaging the pistons and the valves and all the rest of it, and very soon you'd end up with an engine that isn't going to work anymore.
The main thing is having a plan that you sort of apply for each event so that you don't miss something, because every one of them is different, but to have a basic routine that you go through.
Ongoing M5.
So we're going to get another bill after that?
No, this is just the...
ongoing.
Yeah, this is just...
You have to make sure, obviously, so you've sent the photos, the media stuff, maps. You need to make sure that the pilots know where they're going, so they obviously have to have some maps. I normally would just provide them with an exact sort of map where they're going, with lines on the map that's been provided and agreed with the CAA of where they're going for a private event or something that's just we're involved in.
A typical flight day starts with a briefing of pilots and ground crew, covering all of the plans and possibilities for the day. There is much to do behind the scenes, and of course the aircraft is checked thoroughly by pilot and mechanic. When happy with the technical and backroom situation, the machine is slowly wheeled out of the hangar. There is no room for prima donnas, and everyone has to lend a hand.
Clearance from Bravo Gate to the flight line.
Position of the Cherokee coming along the 8 to the right to left, pass to him, you may enter.
The pre-flight ritual is sacred to all pilots, and Lee is no exception.
I actually like having to think, well, how do I start it? You know, how warm is it? How many squirts do I give it to prime it? What sort of temperatures am I going to be looking at? And you're actually nurturing these aeroplanes all the time to get the performance that you want out of them, and you can only do that by knowing them, having a little bit of mechanical background on the aeroplanes, and also all the passion that goes behind these aeroplanes. You need to have a good understanding of, or a mechanical comprehension of what makes these aeroplanes actually work. If you take away the fact you're not going to be shot at, which luckily in this day and age I haven't been, you know, you can then enjoy the pure enjoyment of flight in a Spitfire, which is tremendous because it is one of the nicest handling aeroplanes there could be. There's quite a lot of thought and consideration going back into that as well. So the emotions of flying these airplanes are many. And as display flying, the most important instrument is the airspeed, which is this one here. And in the Spitfire you have rudder pedals, which are probably a lot bigger than most airplanes, but they're probably bigger because you're using them a lot more. It's a good pilot for a World War II warbird. You've got to have the ability to be able to operate and act on your own and take the aeroplane huge distances and actually look after it. Okay, we're all ready. Happy? You going to stay there?
Finally, with a whir of the starter motor, the legendary Merlin cranks into life. MH434 becomes a flying warbird once again. Several years ago, when flying with the 4-ship Brettling fighters led by ace pilot Ray Hanna, the routine was strictly adhered to and the formation flying rehearsed constantly. These aircraft consistently amazed crowds at air shows around Europe, and constant practice was a major part of the discipline. We're filming Lee in the Spitfire from the P-51 Mustang.
And then Ray is going to call looping. We know then that the G is going to come on, and actually, from a piloting point of view, control-wise, power-wise, there isn't a lot of movement going on. All we're doing now is looking at Ray to maintain station, because obviously the airplanes are slowing down now, but we're still carrying a lot of power. So this is where the torque comes in.
Towards the end of the display, the team break for a stunning tail chase, each following the other around the skies as they mimic the deadly dogfights of World War II.
And now we're all the time looking, not inside or anything. Again, Ray is our reference, but now he might be 400 yards ahead of the rear element of the formation, but you're watching him and try not to get left behind, and also you're trying to keep the pattern in the sky looking, hopefully, all the distances roughly the same. But of course now we're in airplanes that are all accelerating at different levels or decelerating at different levels. You're either at one guy's up here, the other guy's down here. So to get the inertia and the flow of the sequence, it's quite difficult in airplanes that aren't matched to actually keep the distances exactly constant. But that's what we're trying to do anyway. We didn't always achieve that, but that's what we were trying to do. You just want to be as close as you can to his prop wash all the time and just a little bit out to one side. To me, the best position when you're doing tail chase is being at the back, because you're following 3 airplanes, not just one, and it's fantastic seeing all these airplanes going around the sky doing what you're just about to do. Obviously you're feeling the G come on and off, and you're naturally aware that you're going to be clenching your stomach muscles as you're pulling into, say, a loop or any sort of tight G manoeuvre, just to stop the blood all rushing out your head and going down to your toes. And you're doing that really without thinking about it. But you are always manoeuvring the stick and the rudders all the time, just to sort of little tiny inputs all the time to get you to keep in this station that we want to stay in. It's very exhilarating seeing that aeroplane manoeuvring across the ground. I find it very exciting. It's a tremendous feeling, really.
Lee is a quiet person, not given to exaggerated gestures or wild statements, but there's no doubting the passion and pride he has in his job, and also the privilege he feels in being able to fly this priceless piece of vintage aviation.
You haven't got time to think, oh, how do I do it? You just get on with it and do it, and it's tremendous, tremendous.
Rather than sounding off about his own skill and expertise, he lets that Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and Spitfire MH434 do the talking.